That's Papa Busengi, one of Gabon's foremost traditional harp or gombe players.
He'll be presenting live music and sharing the history of the instrument at the Iboga Leadership Summit, June 21st to 24th in Libreville, Gabon.
This is a bilingual podcast created in the run-up to the Iboga Leadership Summit. Le Iboga Leadership Summit prendra place du 21 au 24 juin à Libreville, au Gabon. C'est un rassemblement global qui est hébergé par des membres de la communauté Bwiti et qui invite les chercheurs, les avocats pour la santé, les anthropologues, des médecins, des experts en régulation et en politique dans le monde entier. En même temps, nous allons avoir des dialogues avec nos hôtes au Gabon, ainsi que les invités qui viennent du monde entier, afin de nous aider à avoir une meilleure compréhension de l'apprentissage et de l'écoute qui aura lieu pendant le sommet.
This podcast is currently offered in English and French. That's not to suggest that these are the two most relevant languages, nor that translation is possible, relevant, or appropriate to all of the dimensions of Bwiti and Iboga.
It is, however, a chance to learn more from our hosts in Gabon and our guests about Bwiti, the latest thinking on its relationship to the global North's embrace of Iboga and Ibogaine, and the differing cultural resonances of what is meant by good healthcare, healing, and reciprocity. Above all, it's a celebration of Bwiti culture and Iboga in its homeland Gabon. Before these conversations continue, in June, within a relational field characterized by ritual and embodied knowledge, this podcast is your invitation to join in the conversation at the Iboga Leadership Summit, which will include a virtual component for maximum accessibility.
We'll be sharing transcripts and details of all of the academic resources and organizations mentioned in these conversations on the website.
www.ibogaleadershipsummit.com pour les tickets et pour plus de détails, avec des réductions pour les résidents gabonais ainsi que la communauté Bwiti.
Hey, this is Ryan at the Iboga Leadership Summit, and I'm here with Tobias Erny. And so, yeah, we'll get right into it here. How's it going, Tobias?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I think the best place to start is maybe if you want to introduce yourself, kind of the work that you do, and your history with Iboga and Ibogaine, maybe like an origin story, if you will.
Sure. So, yeah, basically I was educated in the chemical-pharmaceutical industry of Basel, Switzerland. And working there, I tried a lot of different substances and having access to different substances. So, I segued also into an opiate addiction back then. And then 2003, I read about Ibogaine in the internet, which was pretty underground back then. And my opiate addiction got worse and worse. So 2006, I detoxed with Ibogaine, which showed me a world I've never really known or seen before. Even so, I tried other psychedelics. Ibogaine was quite different and special. I had a relapse, did again Ibogaine, was again clean for a while, and relapsed again. And then I did Iboga. I just ordered Iboga root bark in the internet. That was 2008. 2006 was the first Ibogaine, and then 2008 was the first Iboga. And this not just opened this other world, but there was this entity, this intelligence, this being guiding me through my own past, but also showing me possible futures. And this was like talking with an hyperdimensional ally, spirit guide or so, which was pretty impressive back then. It still is, but now it became more of a friend than this ally. It's still an ally. And then I started basically helping friends and friends of friends with detoxing drug addictions, not just opiate addictions, but also we had other addictions in our circles. And then it somehow spilled over from friend circles to friends of friends and so on. And then I met a friend of a friend who is also the publisher of Albert Hofmann's books and Stanislav Grof books in the German-speaking realm. He's an owner of a publishing company, and we chatted. And he said, hey, super interesting what you tell me here about Iboga. We don't have a book on Iboga or Ibogaine in the German-speaking realm. You seem to have a background and you have experience. Don't you want to write a book about it? So I started writing the German standard reference on Iboga, which was published with them. And yeah, from there on, it got from something that saved my life to a hobby to a full-time job, more and more. So I started doing more research with it. We organized the European Ibogaine Forum 2017. We did it in Vienna, and I speak at universities. I do some research with this. I travel sometimes to Gabon. So yeah, it got a full-time profession.
Yeah, so I mean, just before we jump into that, like, you know, you mentioned the spirit of Iboga. I love the way you kind of explained it there. It's pretty a difficult thing to explain, but I think ally is a key word. What do you think was really different there? Like, because this is kind of a theme that's actually coming up organically, where people have either done Ibogaine or, Iboga and then Iboga with the tradition, or Ibogaine and then Iboga. So what would you say was totally, outside of the spirit, or maybe what the spirit brought that really made a difference there?
So with Ibogaine, it was for me more an intra-psychological, or like exploring my own personal psyche bubble.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Traveling in my past, and which was back then pretty messy somehow. And I had to tidy up quite a few things.
Yeah.
And Ibogaine really also helps with this introspective component. But then Iboga was something outside of this personal bubble, coming and taking me somehow out of this personal bubble and showing me, guiding me through myself. And at some point, after taking a few times Iboga, it was still with Iboga. I call him a him, but so he helped me to kind of organize myself, tidy up myself, and get my life more in order. And it was like in the beginning more a teacher. He would give me like homework. He would say, don't even bother coming back to me before you have not implemented X, Y, Z in your life. And then I okay, I'll try to do this. And then I get back to him, and then I'll get new tasks. It's more of a teacher-pupil relationship than an only explorative intrapsychological thing, which is for me Ibogaine.
Great. And so do you feel like that relationship has continued on to this day? Like, the teacher-pupil?
Yeah, it became at some point then more of a friend, I'd say. Yeah.
Great.
But I mean,
yeah,
still never stop learning.
Yeah, it's interesting how it kind of stays with you, and I know that you kind of also partake regularly. Do you do regular personal ceremonies as well? Like, I know a lot of the work you do is helping people, but for you as well.
I had this phase of my life where I did like every new moon some kind of a subflood. Currently, I have so much things that it's not that often, but I still try to do 3-4 times a year.
Oh, wow. Great. Nice. And then, so like that, I actually didn't even know that you had published that book in Germany. There's there English versions? It's only in German?
No, so far it's only in German.
Great. And what was the topic? Just like overall Iboga and Ibogaine, or?
it was a compendium of all the knowledge on Iboga and Ibogaine that was available back then, which was 2012, 2013. I wrote it. 2014, still I wrote a bit, and then 2016, it was about to be published, but then there was this conference, and so I kind of weaved also the information of the Tepoztlán conference into the book. Basically, the structure of the book is, first, it's on Iboga in Africa, like Bwiti culture, what was available at that time, knowledge to me. I kind of try to give a picture where Iboga comes from, what's the tradition, how then it made its way into the West, the history of the Western science, so to say, back from the French and then the Swiss, who kind of isolated Ibogaine, or there was a Swiss group and a French group, both isolating it around the same time, and then into this counterculture, where the discovery of Horvath Lotzow in the 60s, what happened there, also then about Herbert, like this guy from Kentucky, the hospital, prison hospital, where they did this research at people of color, not necessarily fully knowing what they were doing. So giving a picture over the history in Africa, the way in the West, the Western history, research history, and then kind of different parts. There's a part on botanics, like the taxonomy and what I was able to find at that time on the botanics, the chemical part with the different alkaloids, part of the extraction where I kind of translated Chris Cheng's extraction manual, and then also manuals for usage, manuals on how to detox, manuals on how to do microdosing, and then also experience reports from myself, from friends, from others. Also, back at that time, there was this church called Sacrament of Transition, which was a Slovenian church, where there was no real doctrine in this church, but there's the Sacrament of Transition, which is Ibogaine, and so when you want to be part of the church, you just have to ingest the sacrament, and from there, path unfolds, basically. And they made a super interesting research where it's disputable if it's real science or not, but they made this aura photography of people taking Ibogaine. And it's really interesting, the before, the during, and the after pictures, how they look. See how chronologically, with this perceived death experience, the aura totally breaks down, and then it builds up, and it's so much stronger and so much more bright after the experience. But the people who told me, who did this research, told me it was quite hard to get the people who were on Ibogaine to actually then commit to the aura photography, because they didn't really want to do it when they were high.
Yeah, I bet. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't have those, I'd never heard of that. But one thing we notice in our retreats is just, we call it the Iboga glow, like after, like the before and after pictures are crazy. And it's almost like an energetic thing. Like, yeah, their skin looks better and they look, they're less stress in their face, but yeah, they're almost glowing. So that, I'd love to learn more about that. And definitely this book, I mean, I'm just going to give you a little nudge. I think that would be a great thing to translate into other languages, because there's a lot of, it's pretty lacking, obviously, in that department.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at it.
So, and then also just because, this, I know that you're the executive director of Gita, and it's kind of, it's in a transition phase, but do you want to talk a little?
Co-director.
Oh, okay, co-director of Gita.
Two other, Claire and Jeremy, are also, we are on the same level. It's not one as the executive. We are co-directors currently.
Great. And so, so do you want to just talk a little bit about that and kind of what that is and was, and maybe what it might be?
Sure. So Gita is the global Iboga Therapy Alliance. It used to be the global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance, but then we kind of rebranded it to also be more inclusive for all the Iboga alkaloids, with the knowledge of the Bwiti in Africa. We basically are a collective that is dedicated to advance the research and the knowledge of Iboga and Ibogaine use in the Western world. More of a collective of therapists and providers. We share knowledge, we share best practices, we try to publish clinical guidelines. The GITA, the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance, back at the time, published these clinical guidelines. So we are about to hopefully update them soon. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I think at least Jeremy will be at the conference. I'm talking to Claire. That'd be really good if she can join as well. So do you want to talk a little bit about this exciting thing that happened in December? I mean, I saw the video and the research just got published, but yeah.
Yes. So after my journey when helping with people with addictions, I also opened up to other fields, and then I witnessed this 2016 patient D it was, and from that time on I also looked more and more into Parkinson's and treated more and more Parkinson patients, and then at the point where we felt a bit more confident in that, we started to systematically assess data. So we now published a case report on a Parkinson's patient who really got a huge alleviation of their symptoms. And I follow quite a few people now with Parkinson's. It's a super interesting field because there are sometimes really happening these miraculous changes. There are people who cannot walk anymore, start riding a bike again. But on the other hand, we also have people who have absolute no effect at all. So the research in this is now, or the academic and systematic research in this is currently relatively young. So it's a very interesting field because there are these different reasons for Parkinsonism. There's, like totally idiopathic Parkinson's where nobody knows where it's coming from. There are environmental toxins. There are genetic causes. Or I have a lot of fighters, people who used to do boxing, Muay Thai, these things. And so it's quite interesting who reacts positive to Iboga, who doesn't. But so far, I'm not at a point where I can pinpoint it down to something.
Really? So do you find that, like, because obviously there's like the conditions-based, or like, environmental caused Parkinson's and then the genetic Parkinson's. Do you at least see a difference that you can speak to on that, like in the way that they're? No? Wow.
We had a couple. Both they were married, and one had these genetic mutations which give rise to Parkinsonism, and his wife didn't have this genetics, but both had Parkinson's, and it worked for both somehow. I had somebody else who had these genetic mutations. There are 6 genes which possibly could be cause for this, and I am not really aware. But this other person didn't react at all. She had also genetic mutations. So we had people with genetic mutations where it did work, and we had people where it didn't work. So I think this is a super interesting field of research unfolding.
And when you say that it didn't work, because I mean I know Iboga, Ibogaine, this in my limited knowledge like works on the dopamine receptors in restoring that. Like, did that have no impact there as well for those people?
They had no impact. For some people, the tremors even got worse, which is super weird. But there are some people who react quite paradoxically to Iboga. Like I would say, for example, 10% of the people I work with, they get tired from Iboga, whereas usually people get more stimulated. So for some people, it has this diametrically opposed reactions. So it's really hard to tell people before or to give any estimate on their reactions. Currently, it's more of a trial and error thing with each individual.
Yeah, I mean that I have that experience in my retreats as well, and like some of the like physical theories are just like liver enzymes, things like that, and how they break stuff down. But one thing I've noticed specifically is like stimulant users or people that are very type A and never sleep. Sometimes they're snoring in ceremony, which I find, it actually upsets some of the other guests sometimes because they're jealous. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, do you feel comfortable talking about a potential spiritual side to all this? Do you feel like maybe, that could help with the science and understanding why there might be a differential impact? Do you think there's even a spiritual impact, or do you think that this is primarily a physical response? Yeah, what do you think about that?
It's
It
a
could be
very
in
good
general,
question.
not just Parkinson's.
There, in general, I have these two sides in me. There's
Hmm.
the more scientific part who really wants to explore it on a very rational, pragmatic level. But
Great.
then there's also the spiritual part that had the experience with this hyperdimensional entity talking to me, and so I cannot I cannot look away.
Of course.
There is the spiritual part. There is a huge spiritual part, and I have the experience not just with Parkinson's, but also with addiction, etc. That depends a lot on what kind of, let's call it, karmic backpack people carry around. There
Yeah.
are some people who just have the karmic seeds for healing, and some people just don't. Might sound a bit too esoteric for some out of a scientific viewpoint, but I definitely have the experience that, for example, I had this. He was a psychologist, and he was very addicted to heroin, but he had a pretty healthy life, and he went running marathons, and he tried to
Oh,
be
wow.
more or less an honest, upright person, but addicted to heroin. And his detox was with a very sincere, honest approach, and his detox was like a very picturesque, like taking Ibogaine, going through the detox without having much withdrawal, and
Oh,
getting
wow.
to know what is the underlying trauma, and being basically clean afterwards. And then other people who have a lot of lying, a lot of crime that they carry around. For example, we had this one guy, he broke down crying through the ceremony, and he didn't tell us
He what?
before.
He broke.
He broke down crying, like
Oh,
he
okay.
started crying, and like it was a facade till that moment of being a very strong, tough guy. And then at some point he just started crying and wanting to tell us everything, and he told us that he is kind of working with the Turkish Secret Service to import tons of heroin, and that he could kill people and rape women in Turkey because the state is basically covering for them, and that he doesn't want to live like that anymore. And it was kind of an exorcism even. He had all these kind of really dark energies around him. And if I compare these two ceremonies, the one was really gentle, smooth, and the one with this a bit tougher karmic backpack was really, really like The Exorcist or something, and lasting much longer and being much, much tougher. So I think it depends a lot what the people carry around with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that idea of the karmic backpack. It's like, it's kind of the bags they pack to bring to the retreat or to the experience. Like you don't know what's in there until,
Yes.
you know. Yeah, that's my experience too. I think it's also like, just for listeners and stuff, like it is really up to us. Like what I have seen, I've also seen people that maybe have a huge bag full of stuff, but the way that they meet the experience is just they're so ready. It kind of depends on like if they're at rock bottom and just, it almost makes it even smoother. Like the more
Yeah.
closer to rock bottom, the more humbled the person is. That stuff can move super fast too.
I
So
think the sincerity or the
yeah,
honest wish to change something is being kind of rewarded by this
yeah,
spirit, in my experience.
totally.
So, for example, this other guy, he did a lot of Iboga ceremonies, and I think he just did them to kind of satisfy his mother. He never really wanted to do it, and it never really worked so much.
Yep.
And he just did it because his environment wanted him to do it, and there it did work so much. But for people who have the sincere wish, like this really deep urge to change and to better themselves, there it works better.
Yeah, and that's like, that's what I kind of love about the spirit, like the way you kind of described it as well, as like a teacher and an ally. Like it's a good teacher isn't gonna just do everything for you and fix everything for you. A good teacher is gonna like, and actually in the Bwiti tradition we say watch, listen, follow. Like it'll demonstrate stuff. And I think what's really cool about Iboga is it points out these patterns, it points out this stuff to you, and then it kind of helps you a little bit, gives you a nudge, but like you have to implement the change. And if there's a willingness there, there's no limit to how far it can go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely true. And it sometimes gave me a slap when I didn't do it. Like it told me in one ceremony, it told me implement this and that. And at this point, it was like stop really smoking tobacco and watch on what you eat and do a lot of sports and don't come back before you did this for a couple months. And I came back before, and he was like, "Nah, you do this first, and then you come back, and then you get the next level of teaching. But first, you have to implement this in your daily life over 3 months, and before you don't do this, I can not teach you anything new."
That's that true parental love. Nice. And so I know that, like, just in talking to you, outside of this, like you have a lot of experience also around microdosing and kind of playing around with that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a field that I don't really have as much experience with, and I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about that for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's one of the most interesting applications for a broader demography of Iboga, because not everybody is necessarily open to have this several days lasting near-death experience. And you can access also people who have no experience with drugs, but you can treat a lot of other conditions. For example, we have people who are depressed, we have people who are bulimic or anorexic, or people who just deal with anxiety. And we usually start with very, very low doses, even subperceptual doses, and increase very, very mildly to the point where they feel some improvement, but they don't feel a psychedelic effect. And usually it stabilizes people, and it gives them a certain inner clarity and honesty that they say they wouldn't have had without Iboga. Also, I think the microdosing helps quite good to get a certain distance between the emotional, let's call it emotional, like there are often these cascades of, there's a trigger coming and then people react in a certain way, and that happens so fast, this trigger reaction cascade, that people sometimes realize only later. And with microdosing Iboga, a lot of people tell me that they can get this little distance towards their own emotional process, and it gives them a little bit space between the trigger and reaction, so that they can think, hey, there is the trigger, I cannot change the trigger, but I can change my reaction. And so they kind of change a bit on how they react in their daily life, which improves their quality of life. And this is accessible in very low doses. So I think it's a super interesting field to make this medicine accessible to a broader demography, and it seeds awareness. It's kind of something that I see people getting more self-aware, getting more aware on how they are interacting with their surroundings. So kind of increasing the general awareness is, I think, something the planet needs a lot.
Yeah, and like, so would you say that it kind of creates a space, right? Like a space between thoughts and a reaction to experience that allows for the person to kind of be more involved and make choices, basically, from that space? Yeah, because like, I know both of us are meditators, and that's kind of what I talked, a little, we don't do as much microdosing, but post-retreat, one of the ways the spirit of the medicine really stays with people is to kind of, that's what it does. It's like, it'll remind you what came up in the retreat. It'll create space between the thoughts and choice, and really just kind of, it's like almost like mindfulness, like, because what happens is I feel like people just get it's just so busy, the lives that we're living, and there's so many, stimuli all the time, that like it builds up so much that we don't even like feel like we have agency between like triggers and choices. And yeah, being able to just create that little crack in there to allow people to really feel like they have agency again, I think could be really impactful.
Yes, absolutely. Also,
Do
it
you
helps
offer?
people, I think, to often people in the Western world have a quite an inner dialogue that is not necessarily healthy. I often perceived, or people told me, how their inner dialogue, how they even got aware of how they are not necessarily nice and self-loving, and
Oh yeah.
having these huge expectations. And with Iboga, I heard it often that people change towards an benevolent inner dialogue and being more loving to themselves. So the realization of how the inner dialogue often makes a lot about your well-being and your feeling, and changing that towards a positive inner dialogue is also something that I see quite a lot.
Yeah, how you narrate your life can really shape how the experience is for sure. Nice. Yeah, and so do you offer like when you with the microdosing and stuff and the people you work with, like do you find yourself like what do you kind of coach them on? Like so when they're having that experience, let's say a trigger comes up, um, do you tell them to kind of rely more on the spirit and see what the spirit's showing them to trust themselves, or do you give them a little bit of like meditation
I work a
practice?
lot with meditation. I'm myself very much grounded in Buddhist meditation, and I like the Buddhist cosmology, and I kind of think that the exploring for yourself or experiencing for yourself part of meditation combined with Iboga and kind of trying to or guiding the people to find their true inner self or their true will instead of what family or society or whatever opposed on them. I see it quite often that people on Iboga realize that they are not living what they want to live, and therefore they take drugs. We had this one guy who inherited a publishing company, and his whole family expected him to do that, and then he got into drugs. And after Iboga, his family was not so happy that he took Iboga, because he basically realized he doesn't want to have the publishing company, stopped using drugs, stopped doing the publishing company, and started doing what he liked. So it's kind of connecting to your true will, or finding your true self, or being true to yourself.
Passe, yeah, yeah. And so that's kind of where I personally, and I know you do as well, like where I see Bwiti and Buddhism kind of relate. Really just kind of pointing out your true nature and ways to kind of meet that and relate to that. And I know that you do a lot of trips to Gabon, and you've been initiated, I think, a few times, right? A few different
In
times.
Gabon, it was just one large Dissoumba-Fang initiation.
Great. I mean, are you comfortable talking a little bit about that and what your
Sure, sure.
experience has been with Bwiti?
Sure, sure,
Nice.
sure. So, I mean, I did first a lot of work with Iboga in Europe, basically by myself and with my friend circles. So when I traveled first to Gabon, they were telling me, he knows you quite good. And so they knew that I knew somehow. And the initiation was really nice because we did this 9 days of preparation where no phone, no books, no reading, not much talking, drinking some weird smoothies that make you go to toilet 10 times, and making enemas, and doing a lot of cleansing with different herbs 5 times a day. And then getting tiny spoons, a few, like 3, 4, 5 spoons or so, and doing more ceremonies, finding the true intention, connecting to the spirits of the jungle. And then at some point they were like, now you're ready. They told me basically we Westerners are quite disconnected from nature, and that for them nature currently all the time talks to them. And they told me, tell us everything that happens to you. And I was walking through the forest, and then this really huge beetle, it's like a scarabaeus, or it sounded like a drone or like a tiny helicopter, it was really loud, circled around my head, and then just left again. And then I told them, there was this beetle circling around me, and they were, yeah, now you're ready. And then they prepared for the big ceremony where they had this huge plate of a lot of Iboga. And I eat it, and yeah, it was a really interesting multi-dimensional journey with meeting kind of angels, but also exploring these different timelines. It was kind of a realization on how there are these multiple possible realities and how I can, with my own decisions and choices, can kind of switch different timelines or realities that unfold. It was really good, nice experience.
And since then, how do you feel like that's really like what do you feel like you took home with you? Or how it's kind of, integrated into your own life?
So basically, it was a confirmation of a lot of things that I already did at home before, meaning talking with plants, connecting with trees. In Buddhism, they say some devas or these angelic beings or celestial deities reside sometimes in trees, or that this communication with nature is something that I really love. I loved it before, and they endorsed it, and somehow these old Druidic traditions from Europe did the same. I read a lot on this, and so
Oh, great.
back in home, I kind of integrated that already. This, let's say, Northern European shamanism, and I saw how it's basically more or less the same with slightly different tools that they do there, but it endorsed and confirmed a lot on the natural spirituality or connection with plants, that there's a lot of knowledge in plants.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, if you ask, at least here in the States, like if you ask people what animism is, like I think like most people, a lot of people don't know, or they don't really understand. They're like kind of what it means, but I think like 98% of our ancestors were animist, right? In human history, like almost all of our ancestors were animist, and it's very new the way that we think. So it's like that's also been my experience. Like when I interact with like more other indigenous cultures, Tibetan Buddhism, Bon tradition, things like that, Tantra, like at the root is this like very animist understanding of the world. And so, because you're a scientist, professionally, and also have this like very spiritual life, can you share a little bit about like your view? Like, does that view impact your research? Does it impact you more personally? Do you think that it could be beneficial, maybe for an opening in the scientific world to kind of at least potentially coming to understand those worldviews and ways it might interact and impact treatment models, the actual research itself?
Mm-hmm. It's something where I really try to make a synthesis for myself, and I think a couple of years back, if you would have done research like 20 years ago or so into maybe in a psychological world it was possible, but in this natural science world it was still very weird looked at, and I think this opens up quite a bit now with ayahuasca and with Iboga research, but the full synthesis is interesting. It's something where it's a work in progress for me personally.
Totally. I think that's the only way you can approach these things too. It's crazy because once you think you know what it is, it seems to change.
Yeah. What I think is super interesting, for example, is where what I cannot explain as scientific, from a scientific viewpoint, is there is this ibogaine derived from Wakanga, from Wakan gene. So basically it's the ibogaine molecule, but it has never seen an Iboga shrub. And then there's ibogaine extracted from Tabernante Iboga, from an Iboga shrub. And a couple of providers told me they need about 15% more of the ibogaine that is derived from Wakanga than from the ibogaine that is coming from the Tabernante Iboga shrub, both being tested at 99% purity ibogaine. So it's like, what is it that makes it less effective a bit when it doesn't come from Tabernante Iboga? This is something that is so I heard it a couple times anecdotally, so it's not real hard science, so to say, but it's something where I'm looking at how can that be? It's both 99% pure Ibogaine, but the one works slightly different than the other.
Totally. And then, have you heard anything about the experience itself, or is it pretty similar? I mean, I know, a lot of that's for detox, correct, and things like that. But
I personally don't like taking Ibogaine derived from Wakanja so much. I'm a fan of the plant.
You're a purist.
Iboga, the spirit, so to say. But in science we need to use 99% pure Ibogaine, and in best case scenario often derived from Wakanja, to not over extract too much Tabernante trees.
Great. And so on that topic, actually, just because I know I've spoken to you about this before, but like for the audience, can you talk a little bit about the other alkaloids found in Iboga, and maybe just talk about that in general? Because a lot of the focus is always on Ibogaine, but I know you as a researcher and a scientist, you have a good understanding also on that. So yeah, whatever you want to say about that, I think it's an interesting topic.
It's an endless enigma. Like when I started researching Iboga more, there were 12 known alkaloids. I think now there is a list of 30 to 50 something alkaloids, and I'd love to know how the different alkaloid composition somehow influences the different experiences. So I think this is a future research field. Let's take, for example, cannabis, the field of cannabis research, where they now kind of analyzed all the different terpenes and flavonoids that give a certain nuance to the experience. And I think it's the same with Iboga or Tabernante. And I for example, Chris Changs says that he thinks ibogamine and ibogaline are twice as potent as Ibogaine, but they are less dominant in the plant. So it would be super interesting what kind of hybrids you could make to get the perfect alkaloid profile, which serves the cause you're looking for better. But it's a big field that's coming.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I just know it's almost like one way I've thought about it is like, because I've worked with a lot of different Iboga plants and batches, and they obviously, I think if you tested them, might have very different alkaloid content and makeups and varying levels of each. And so I kind of think of it as like the spirit's physical profile. Like if you're talking in an animist tradition, like in an animist way, like that's the way it manifests physically for us. But like you might experientially feel it as like, I've had medicines that like hold on, like get you in a headlock and just stay there for 24 hours, and some that like come on strong and then let go, and some that are way softer usually. I mean, it all varies, but I definitely think that's tied to the alkaloids. And I definitely think too, like research wise, like, if we were to create, work with, because the entourage effect and like kind of the different alkaloids together and finding out which ones work for different things. Like some of them I know are cardioprotective even, I've heard, and like different things like that, or have less of a ataxia effect. Do you see, just because you're much more involved in the research world, do you see much of a future for that? Or do you think that people are just 100% focused on Ibogaine? And
I mean, there is a part of the scene that is 100% focused on Ibogaine, and I think all these Iboga or Ibogaine analogs like 2-oxa-Ibogaine and tabernantolog, all these synthetic analogs, this will be a huge field in future. I'm personally not such a huge fan of it. I like the plant spirit, but I think
me too.
Yes, but I think in both directions. On the botanical side, it's a huge field where a lot of research will be going on in future, I guess. And on the pharmaceutical or purely chemical side, there's also a huge field to be explored. So no matter which direction we go, it's interesting to explore there.
Totally. And so, okay, so you mentioned the future, and actually one of the things I really wanted to make sure I got in here is, for you, being so immersed in this for so long, like, what do you want? Like, what would the best, like, what do you want to focus on the most and kind of see be impacted through your own work? And then what do you want to see overall in the future of Ibogaine, like, in general, in Iboga?
I think it would be really beautiful if it would be implemented in the Western world as an accredited plant medicine that is not just used as a pharmacological intervention which binds to receptor X, Y, Z, but which is used as an agent to connect people more to nature, to themselves, as a spiritual tool, not just a pharmacological tool.
And as far as like a treatment model, like do you see, with Parkinson's and stuff like that, do you see that, the data's there and that that there's potential for that, I mean, I know that you're operating in Europe, like do you see European countries opening up to that as a potential treatment model in the future, or do you think it's a long road?
It's kind of schizophrenic because
Yeah.
it's legal here. It's not Schedule 1, but there is happening much less than in the United States. Like in the United States, it's a huge thing now, and in Europe, slowly people start to grasp it or pick up on it. But it's legal, and there is very little research being done here. So I hope that this changes soon.
Yeah, me too. All
Well, in
right.
some
And then
countries
so
it's legal. In some countries it's illegal. Correct.
yeah, and I just spoke about Europe very broadly,
Yes.
probably a very American thing to do, but like I know here it seems like it's still a long road, but there's a lot of different inroads and things moving fast. Do you, let's say it does become legal, do you like, or if it does become a treatment and stuff, do you have any thoughts on like accessibility, better methods of approach with that? Because I know in Europe and in different countries in Europe, some of them have like universal healthcare and things that us Americans could never dream of. But like, is
So
there?
there's things going on right now. A friend of mine, a partner of mine, he is also knows people working in insurances, and
Oh,
currently
okay, great.
basically the state is paying for, or the health insurance that everybody is obliged to have here in Germany is paying for long-term therapy. So if you are a drug addict, you are getting paid a 3 months rehab from the state, and it
Oh,
costs
wow.
basically the state or the health insurance quite some money. And the success rates are not that high. So there are often people jumping back and forth between detox rehabs and normal life, which is quite costly. And so we want to look into the economics of it and kind of convince the research the insurance companies that if we implement Iboga, there is a higher probability for the people to change their life sustainably, long term. So this is something where I'm looking forward to explore it.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the insurance company angle because it's like if it has efficacy, if it's actually working, in the long run, that's going to save insurance companies money.
It's
So it's
cheaper.
a
It's
huge
much
incentive.
cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, to wrap things up, do you have, an idea? Like, can you maybe give some people, in the space advice, and people that are looking to come to the conference, kind of what to expect, what to expect with your talk? Because like one of the things, we're finalizing talks here, and I know probably for you, a lot of it will be on this Parkinson's microdosing and the things we just discussed here. But what do you have to say about the scene, and what advice do you have for people that are, trying to get into this work or potentially going to do Iboga or Ibogaine?
So in regards on the conference, I'm really looking forward to have a dialogue and kind of finding a synthesis of the more scientific approach, but also incorporating the traditions and
Great.
seeing what kind of synthesis is possible there and learning from each other. And for people who want to get into Iboga, I think the best is to get as informed as much as possible before taking any. It's not very wise to just order something that is sold as Iboga online and just ingested. So get informed and educate yourself.
Great. Yeah. That's even though both of us kind of did that.
Yes,
Yeah. Don't do what we did though, and we learned the hard way. So take that. Well, thanks so much, Tobias. And I'm sure that there'll actually probably be another podcast with you before the conference, or it's actually the summit. But if anybody wants to find you and your work, do you have like a place that they can do that, or?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I am one of these weird individuals that stays off social media. So I don't have Facebook, I don't have Instagram or anything. If you want to contact me, email tobias@ibogaalliance.org. But I'll try to. LinkedIn is the only thing that I'm sometimes using.
Great. And is it okay if maybe we can link to I saw that really great video about your research, the Parkinson's research, and then the research itself. Maybe we'll link to that in the show notes for people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, you can link
awesome.
to the paper.
Great.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Tobias. Yeah, of course.
All the best. Talk to you soon. Looking forward to meeting you.